review of... Blanked on the title. There we go. Fire Emblem Echoes, Shadows of Valentia. The last Fire Emblem game released for the 3DS. I haven't reviewed a game in... I don't know, quite a while. Like, I never reviewed any Switch games. Or even some of the games I played. Like, it's just kind of... I've been doing the Let's Play structure thing for so long, it's hard for me to, like... I don't know, gather my thoughts on a game, if that makes any sense. And, like, get them out in a review. But I'd like to start doing game reviews more. Especially because I don't know, I kind of want to start doing Let's Plays less. But, that's a topic for an update video in the future. Pardon all that sound. I was fixing something on my desk just now. I just realized while I was talking, it was like, messing with my computer. But yes, Fire Emblem Echoes, Shadows of Valentia. I've been playing this game for the past few months because of I have not had my Switch, which is all the topic of an update video. Why is not important, basically. I haven't had access to my Switch, so I was like, you know what 3DS DS game did I never finish? And there are two big ones. Fire Emblem Echoes, and the other one I've been playing is Super Mario 64 DS. Maybe I'll make a video on that. I think I already reviewed that, like, years ago. I just never got... I'm 1 star away from 150 stars, so it's like, that's a thing I'm doing now. But before I was doing that, I was playing some Fire Emblem Echoes, Shadows of Valentia, which is what this video is supposed to be about, but I just spent half a minute talking about Super Mario 64 DS, because I don't know. Anyway, Fire Emblem Echoes Shadows of Valentia is the last Fire Emblem game released for the 3DS. I'm not sure exactly when it came out. I think it came out in like 2017 or 2016, late in the 3DS life cycle. I'm pretty sure when I got it, the Switch was already out, and I might have already had one. So I only played the first act, and I did that in like a day, because the first act is easy tutorial mode. Or a day or two. And then that was one summer like 2 years ago. You know, whatever year the game first came out. I got it on an E3 summer sale, I think, and I played it a little bit during the summer. And then I was like, you know what, I want to dive back into this game, because I enjoyed this game. I just didn't... Because it was on the 3DS, I didn't give it a fair shot. I didn't give it much time. So I jumped back in, starting at Chapter 2, where Celica's party takes control, and that connects to a key aspect of this game that makes it really interesting. Is there's two separate, like, there's one map, and then you have two separate campaigns, Alm and Celica. They're these kids who were separated at a young age, and then, like, he has a story, and she has a story, and then at one point you can jump between their stories as you choose once you get to Chapter 3, so that makes it a really fun, like, you've got this open-ended map layout where you can pick and choose which character you want to do stuff with at what time, and they each have their own separate stories. They unite at the end, but it's not until a ways in. So it's kind of this, like, double-pronged story thing, and the map is just really cool in general. Like, it incorporates the strategy elements, because, like, you'll move, and there are some enemies on the map that will move to different spots on the map, and so you can sometimes end up in an encounter with those. You figure out how to go around certain enemies. There's all these kind of branching paths. It's a really cool aspect of the game that I don't think the other Fire Emblem games really do, at least not most of them. So that's something really cool about Fire Emblem Echoes. What's something else? I'm sorry. I'm trying to think of something else that's very unique to Fire Emblem Echoes that I really enjoy. But really, it's mainly that. The dual-pronged story and the way that you can, like, switch between the two stories, and, like, the map. I love dynamic maps in games. It's a fun thing. Dynamic world maps. But the missions are also great, too. I think the game's missions start out a little rough. Like, Chapter 1 didn't really grab me when I played it a few years ago, because the missions were just kind of meh, 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 easy. And then when they did get hard, I kind of wasn't prepared. Like, there were a few characters that died in the chapter 1 that I was just like, oh wait, they died? Like I was going through a lot of the game wondering why Alm's team didn't have a sick archer like Celica's did. And then I realized there was one, but he died in like a very early chapter. But that's another cool thing. The game does have points where you can revive a few characters. So at one point I revived that archer and then managed to I had to grind a little bit for XP for him, but I managed to level him up into a competent unit, and then it was like, oh shit, now this team has an archer. This is sick. Excuse my language, but it's cool. And I like that. That's tied into the dungeon system the game has. There are certain areas where you go in and you're moving around in a 3D space, randomly encountering enemies and going through a cave or a maze or whatever. And those segments I liked those segments because they added some variety to the gameplay between so it wasn't just map movement, level, map movement, level. The only problem with those segments is the random encounters did get a bit annoying. I mean, they're not random. You can see the enemies, but every enemy you encounter goes into a little mini turn-based battle mission. So if you're in the dungeons for a while, and some of the late-game dungeons are really long, the entire last chapter of the game is basically a big dungeon. And it starts to become annoying after a while, especially because there are certain mechanics that don't reset, and I'll go into that in a little bit, but there's, it's just because the enemies will respawn if you leave the room and come back. So if you get lost, you end up having to deal with a ton of enemies, and at a certain point you're just let me run past you, and then if you fail to run past them, sometimes they get the jump on you, and it affects how the battle placement starts, and it just becomes tedious to do all these tiny turn-based battles over and over again. That's a big flaw, I think, with the game. The dungeon systems would be better if the enemies were just not quite so present. I feel like there are about as many enemies as there would be in a normal video game, in a normal RPG dungeon, where every encounter doesn't take you into a little mini battle with several dudes. So it just kind of grates on you after a while. But other than that, I really have no complaints about the games. I mean, there were some missions that were kind of BS, but I mean, that's like any game like this. There's always going to be one mission or two missions or whatever that you don't like. But overall, I'm the story was really interesting. The dual, Alm and Celica are both really interesting protagonists, and the way they relate with their party and with each other is really cool. There's also towns in the game that you get to kind of explore, and that's fun. Although they give you way too many you examine those towns, you find little items or whatever. They give you way too many items. My item inventory was just so full. There was a bunch of good okay, so in the dungeons there's a fatigue system as well, which I didn't like. But the main reason I didn't like it is once a unit gets fatigued, they're just worse, and there's not a lot you can do with them outside of send them out of the dungeon. What I didn't realize until the final dungeon was that there are items you can get and use that will restore a character's fatigue settings, cure their fatigue. I didn't know that because these items were buried down in my list of 27 wines and 40 pieces of bread. It's just they give you too much, and the only person who can directly access that stuff at any given time is the main unit, Alm or Celica. So, they give you enough healing items that every character, nobody should ever die, but not everybody can access them. So you just end up with all these healing items that you don't really need because you have to move next to Alm to be able to access the convoy, they call it. And it's other Fire Emblem games have that, but this game just, gives you way too many items for how that system works. And it's units can take one of those items and have them in their inventory, but that fills up their one inventory slot, and you never get more. So it's just oh, well, now I can't use a special weapon anymore, and my attack's going to be a lot weaker. Yeah, I'll keep the weapon. I'm not going to take a freaking loaf of bread. I didn't really like that aspect. That was what I didn't like. The dungeons, and then the dungeons kind of exasperated that. There's one maze area that kind of sucks. It's not a perfect game. But I think it does a lot of things that I haven't really played much other Fire Emblem games, but I've seen a lot of other Fire Emblem games, and Echoes does a lot of things that, to my knowledge, other Fire Emblem games don't really do, which gives it its own interesting, it gives it its own unique charm. It's got, and I think some of that is it's a remake of the second Fire Emblem game, an NES game. I don't know how much they upgraded. It seems like they had to have added a lot, because there is a lot of dialogue in this game, all fully voice acted too. All of it has full voice. Well, I feel like I think occasionally you'll encounter a nameless NPC with no voice acting, but it's always like people saying useless stuff. Anything important is being said with voice acting. I'm trying to think of other things I liked about the game and didn't like. The level, I mean, like I was saying, the missions are generally really good, really fun. I struggled with some of them, but that's what's nice about the map system is, if you're having trouble with one mission, you die on that mission, you can just switch to the other party, or you can move your party back and go fight little baby enemies for a while to grind XP, go into the dungeons and grind XP. There's a lot of freedom to how you play the game. It's not just, here's a mission 1, here's a mission 2, here's a mission 3, here's a mission 4. One thing the game doesn't do, though, that I know a lot of other Fire Emblem games do, because I've seen those games, is the missions don't really have much variance into how they're completed. Like other Fire Emblem games, sometimes you can complete a mission by just lasting a certain amount of turns, or getting to a specific character, or killing a specific enemy. In Echoes, every mission is kill every single enemy, which makes them a bit repetitive. But because the stuff outside of missions is so varied, it kind of makes up for that. I still wish there were some there are some chapters where it would make more sense, I felt, for the battle to end when X thing happened, but it doesn't. I think that's because it's a remake of an NES game, so they didn't have that kind of stuff in Fire Emblem yet, and they just didn't feel the need to change any of the mission conditions. But that was and you can't recruit any characters on the battlefield, which I think is kind of, there were some battles where I put myself in bad situations trying to recruit a character, and then you can't recruit them. I feel like there were a lot of characters that you maybe should have been able to recruit. The only time you can recruit characters is when you're in this 3D perspective, and you're like, oh, I'll talk to this person, and then they're like, yeah, sure, I'll join the party. And there's a lot of cool characters, but I don't know. I wish it was a little more. I feel like there could be some characters you could miss or whatever. That's some of the interesting things other Fire Emblem games don't have that this one does. That's what's interesting about Echoes. It's very different. It's still Fire Emblem. It's still clearly Fire Emblem, but it's a little different from the usual Fire Emblem, which I say as if I've played any of the usual Fire Emblem games. I played FE6 on an emulator, some of it. So my experience is very limited, but I've watched a lot of the games on streamers, YouTubers, whatever. So I know how Fire Emblem generally works, and there are some things about Echoes that kind of go against how Fire Emblem generally works, for good or for bad. But I'd say if you're a Fire Emblem fan, it's something to check out. And even if you're not, I wouldn't call myself a Fire Emblem fan, but I enjoyed this game. If you like strategy games, if you like RPGs, if you like games with good stories, I'm not going to say it's a great story because it is pretty basic, but it's a good story. Yeah, play Fire Emblem Echoes. There's also, if you're new to Fire Emblem like I was, there's a rewind system. It's called Mila's Turn Wheel. You get a certain amount of rewinds per battle, essentially, where, uh-oh, my unit died, time to rewind to X point. And, it sounds like something that would cheapen the game, but honestly, it really didn't for me, because sometimes you just get yourself stuck in a position where no amount of rewinding can help you, and sometimes, and you also get a limited amount of rewinds. And even in the dungeons, your rewinds don't restore when you leave a combat encounter, which is one thing that did make some of the dungeons kind of annoying. The entire final dungeon, you get no turn wheel respawns, so you're literally you fight 3 bosses and a bunch of enemies without any chances to recover rewinds, which kind of sucks, but at the same time, it's okay, this is the final level, fine. up the difficulty a little bit, I guess. And you also get the teams unite at a certain point in that dungeon, so then you have way more units, and it's like, well, now you don't really need all the rewinds. I think by the end of the game, the max you can have is like 9. Unless there were you find little cogs that have the turn wheels in them. That you find these I think they call them cogs that unlock a new turn wheel, and I don't know if I found them all. I think I did. I might have missed one though. But 9 seemed like the max you have, but you start the game with like 3. So as you get more as you go on, and the game also gets harder. The game has a good difficulty progression. I didn't really feel like there was ever a point where it's like, whoa, this is a big jump in difficulty, and I'm not prepared. Like, yeah, a good difficulty progression, good missions, good story and characters. I mean, everything about it, I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. And I'm definitely going to be playing more Fire Emblem games and probably reviewing them and maybe streaming them or making Let's Plays of them. I don't know what the state of my Let's Playing and streaming is right now. I'm going to have to make an update video soon just talking about all that, because there's a lot going on in my life right now, kind of outside of that just, yeah. And I also just haven't been very motivated to do that kind of stuff lately. That's why I've been playing Fire Emblem Echoes instead, because it's like, it's a 3DS game. I don't have a 3DS capture card. I'm not gonna try to capture it, so I'm just gonna play Echoes, and it's fun, and I enjoyed it, and I'm glad that the circumstances in my life arranged to give me the chance to go back to this game that I started and then forgot about. I'm not sure what I'm going to play. I have a ton of games in my backlog. I don't know what I'm going to play next. I'm sure there's something else for the DS or 3DS I could play as well. I have a bunch of games. I have a lot of games and not enough time and not enough... I have trouble deciding what games I'm going to play. That's why I don't make game reviews, because I don't like to review a game unless I finished it, and there are a lot of games I don't finish. Like, a lot. I have like 10 PS4 games and I've never finished any of them. No, I did. I finished Yoku's Island Express, but I never reviewed it. That was something I wanted to review, but at this point it's been months since I've played it, so I don't know. I wanted to review it once I 100%ed it, and then there was one thing that I couldn't get. I don't know if the game glitched out. This is not relevant to Fire Emblem. Arrivederci!